Hi there, I'm Jason with the All Things Open team. We're here with John. Please introduce yourself to our community.
Thanks, Jason. Good to be here. My name is John Reifschneider. I am the founding director of the AI Masters of Engineering program at Duke University and also the co-founder and CEO of a company called Inquisit, which is an AI platform for researchers and science teams.
Awesome. Well, we're going to talk a lot about AI today, so appreciate that. What's exciting about the future of AI?
Yeah, there's a lot to be excited about. The models keep getting better, and depending on who you ask, that pace is sort of faster or slower, but I think it's hard to argue that it is getting better, and we expect it will continue. I think we're also getting a lot smarter at building systems around these AI models, which is the piece of it that to me is really exciting, maybe even more than sort of the foundation models themselves getting better. We're figuring out how to chain these things together, combine them, how to create, as we call it, agents out of these models to make them a lot more powerful and a lot more capable than what we could have done, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago with them.
So there's a lot of excitement around AI. What are some of the challenges that we face?
We still have challenges with bias. We have challenges with misinformation. We have challenges with hallucinations of the models. The models basically spitting out sort of factually incorrect statements, and it's very hard for humans to figure that out. It's a common problem we face with a lot of students at Duke. Even they'll ask a model a question, they'll get an answer, they'll assume it's right because it sounds right and it's said very confidently. It's something even I run into. I use ChatGPT all the time to prepare for class, anticipate questions students are going to ask, and so on. Kind of push the limits of my own knowledge, and sometimes I'll get answers back, and I'll be a little bit skeptical, but it's not obvious to me that it's wrong. So I actually have to go and sort of do some research on my own to figure out if it was right or wrong. So I think that's one of the big issues. Probably the biggest issue, though, is sort of the digital divide being exacerbated by AI between sort of the people who have welcomed it into their life and adopted it and are using it actively, and those who are not. Every time I see the figures for folks who either have never heard of or have not used ChatGPT, it always amazes me. We live in sort of an AI bubble in what I do at Duke, and I just assume that everybody's using AI, and that's far from the truth, I think, in the real world. And I think the reality is that people who are using it and have figured out how to use it to increase their own productivity, they're going to accelerate sort of their productivity at a much faster pace than people who are not using it. And I think that's going to create some issues in our economy, kind of that what we used to call the digital divide, maybe we call the AI divide. That's probably the biggest issue I think I see.
That's very interesting. Are there any kind of leading solutions to that problem, or any ideas that people are exploring right now to address that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot being explored. I think it comes down to workforce training and whether there's kind of a question around who should be doing that and whose responsibility is that. And there are different possible answers. I think one is the individuals themselves. And there are a tremendous amount of online courses. Most of them are free or very low cost. And so the bar is very low to get started with it, taking courses, learning about how to use it. And then there's the employer, right? And so what obligation does the employer have to provide that training and those tools to their employees to use? One issue is sort of education and knowledge around how to use it. There's also cost issues. Fortunately, the cost is not, or up till now, hasn't been tremendously high to use the models, $20 a month, let's say, but now we see things like the $200 a month package from OpenAI being rolled out. That's a whole different ballgame. And so, maybe you look at $20 and you say, well, maybe everybody should be able to afford that. But you look at $200 and that's something totally different. So, I think there's a question around employers providing access to these tools for their employees to use, providing the training to be able to use them. And then government entities as well. I think the government has some responsibility to upskill the workforce as well, given kind of the clear trend and the increasing role that AI is playing in the economy versus what we as humans are doing. I think there is some responsibility with the government to sort of help us upskill or reskill the workforce.
So it's a full spectrum problem. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, you mentioned kind of shocked at some of the numbers of folks who haven't been exposed to AI. If someone's brand new, how do they get started?
Yeah, this is a great question. Like I said, there's a huge amount of content online. It's free, and so there's a lot of great ways to do it. Of course, I'm biased. I have some courses on Coursera that I actually created kind of pre-ChatGPT, so they're 3 years old. They're a little bit dated now, but You can audit them free, and they were designed as kind of a no-code entry into AI, kind of focusing on the concepts, the intuition of what's happening in AI. There are plenty of other ones. There's some great ones on Coursera from Andrew Ng. There has some really good ones that are kind of AI for everyone, or generative AI for everyone, that are designed for complete beginners. A lot of the major tech companies have put out kind of getting started videos and tutorials, which are also great. So I don't think there's a right or wrong path. I think it's just kind of getting started, pick something to get started with, and then figure out kind of what to layer on. The other thing that's great is just start using it. And I would do kind of that in parallel to learning about it, right? So you can hop on ChatGPT or whatever your preference is, Gemini, Claude, whatever, and just start using it free and see what it can do, kind of test it out, try to push its limits, figure out what it can do for you and what it can't do for you. And I would do that, and then in parallel, just invest some time in learning about it, because I think once you understand sort of what's happening behind the scenes, how these things actually work at least at a conceptual level, it gives you a much better appreciation for what you can use them for, and what you should use them for, what you shouldn't use them for.
Well, I want to tap into your passion around education. Why are you passionate about AI education?
I have always been passionate about education. My mom's a teacher. I grew up wanting to teach someday. I was able to do that a little bit earlier in life than expected. I always thought it'd be kind of my retirement job. Obviously, I'm not at retirement age quite yet. So I was very fortunate to have that opportunity to do that, to be able to teach. And then AI has also been a passion of mine for a long time, probably since probably around 2010 is when I started getting kind of really interested in what we call machine learning back then, and how it could be applied to generate predictions of things. And so I started through what I was doing at the time in the industry, was building machine learning models. I used to run a weather forecasting business, and so we built models that would predict power outages for electric utilities, or predict turbulence, for example, what we call predictive analytics. And so that was my first real exposure into the world of AI, was building these predictive models to do those things. In sort of around 5 or 6 years ago, I sort of switched and put a lot more focus in natural language processing. And again, this was kind of pre-ChatGPT, very early days of large language models. And the last 5 or 6 years have been very focused on NLP. Sort of the idea of text just kind of fascinates me, and so I started teaching some NLP classes at Duke. I teach our large language model class, and it's just really fun for me to sort of see the light bulbs go off in the students when you sort of expose them to these concepts. It's like you can almost see it, their brain working and sort of finally clicking and understanding. And that's a great feeling as an instructor when you kind of see that. And then, fast forward a couple of years and you look at what they then go on to do, some amazing things, and it's really rewarding to feel like you were a small piece of kind of enabling them to be able to go do those things.
What are some of the main skills students should focus on to thrive in a future AI-driven economy?
For a while, the pendulum kind of swung very heavily, I think, towards the hard skills, right? Programming being the main one. And now I think it's starting to swing back the other way a little bit, where we're seeing a return to the soft skills and people sort of rediscovering how important the soft skills are. There's interesting questions around sort of the future of programming and what role humans will have, what role AI will have. It's a long discussion, but AI will certainly have a very predominant role, I think, in programming. And so, we as humans, I think, are going to be placed kind of more in the driver's seat. AI needs to operate under instructions, right? And to get what you want with AI, you've got to be very good at sort of guiding it in the right path. And that requires a whole set of skills: critical thinking, analytical skills, problem-solving skills, all the skills that are very unique to us as humans, I think, that are very hard to replicate in AI. And so I think there's going to be a return at sort of all levels of education, certainly at the university where I teach, to instilling those skills in our students, kind of less sort of rote learning of a new programming language or the hard skills, and more focus on how do we teach those things? How do we teach problem solving? How do we teach critical thinking? And some, I think in a lot of universities that piece of it is probably not given enough attention, and so I think we're going to need to put a lot more emphasis on teaching those skills.
Looking ahead to 2025, where do you think the largest AI advancements will be for this year?
I'm really excited around sort of the whole field of agentic AI, creating these AI agents, probably less for the technology themselves and more sort of in the unique applications of them and the kind of the unique ways that we're structuring these to go and do real work for people. I think the early days of kind of ChatGPT and the large language models were really about, it was kind of a fun tool, it was a useful tool, it was something you could kind of get quick help from. And now we're seeing kind of a transition from that to AI actually kind of doing work. either supporting people or sometimes even in place of people. And so that's really interesting and certainly has some challenging implications, I think, for the workforce, but at the same time, very exciting in terms of the productivity gains that I think we can see by allowing AI to take on some jobs in our economy. And, of course, that means today there's humans in those jobs, and so we're going to have to retrain sort of and upskill humans, into other jobs. But I think it is exciting for the productivity gains that we can see, particularly the jobs maybe that are maybe less interesting, very tedious, very rote types of jobs that are not particularly attractive for your average human to take on. The prospect of AI taking those on to free us up to do the work that is really interesting and requires those sort of uniquely human skills that we were talking about earlier, I think is interesting. I think we're already starting to see that and show up in kind of the very early stages, and I think we'll see a lot more of that this year. Companies actually kind of sitting down and making decisions, proactively making decisions around, do I want to hire a human for this role or do I want to hire an AI system to do this role?
Fascinating. Wow. All right, John. Well, thanks for your time today. Thanks for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.